She didn't leave because he was cruel. She left because he was comfortable. He agreed with everything she said. He softened every edge she tested. He rearranged his spine to fit the shape of her approval. And one Tuesday afternoon, with no argument, no betrayal, no dramatic collapse, she looked at him and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, emptiness. The kind that doesn't scream, it just leaves. What she wanted, what every woman wants, but will never ask for out loud, is something 99% of men are psychologically incapable of giving. Not because they lack the tools, because they lack the nerve. And by the end of this, you will understand exactly what it is, why it rewires her brain, and how the Stoics mastered it centuries before modern psychology had a name for it. There's a word in ancient Greek that has no clean translation. The Stoics used it constantly, Parisia. It meant something close to fearless speech. The willingness to say what is true regardless of consequence. Not rudeness, not cruelty. Radical, unfiltered honesty, delivered without apology and without anger. And here is what no one in the modern dating landscape will tell you. Parisia is the single most attractive quality a man can possess. More than looks, more than status, more than any technique buried in any book. Because when a man speaks truth to a woman, when he refuses to edit himself to protect her comfort, he communicates something her nervous system cannot ignore. He is not afraid of losing her, and a man who is not afraid of losing her is a man who chose her freely, not out of desperation, not out of scarcity, out of genuine selection. Her biology reads this signal before her conscious mind can intercept it. She feels it in her posture, in her pulse, in the sudden tightness behind her ribs. She'll later describe it to her friends as, "I don't know, there's just something about him." That something is Parisia, and it terrifies modern men. Because modern men have been fed a catastrophic lie. That love means making her comfortable at all costs. That a good man absorbs, agrees, accommodates. That friction is failure. The Stoics would have laughed at this loudly. Here's why. We live in an era of emotional inflation. Compliments are cheap. Agreement is currency. The average man has been trained to believe that the path to a woman's heart runs through her comfort zone. Tell her what she wants to hear. Validate her feelings. Agree with her opinions. Never challenge. Never correct. Never risk the friction that truth creates. This produces a very specific outcome. She feels safe. And safety in small doses builds trust. But safety without tension builds boredom, and boredom is the silent executioner of desire. It doesn't arrive with a knife. It arrives with a yawn. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus spent his youth as a slave in Rome. His master once twisted his leg during a beating. Epictetus calmly said, "You're going to break it." The twisting continued, the leg snapped, and he said, "I told you so," not bravado. A man who had found something inside himself that could not be touched. A center of gravity that didn't shift based on what was happening to him. He carried that same unshakable core into every philosophy lecture he ever gave. Students crossed empires to sit at his feet, not because he was kind, but because he was immovable. Women respond to this quality the way the tide responds to the moon. Not by decision, but by physics. When you tell a woman the truth she doesn't want to hear, when you hold your ground while she storms, when you refuse to soften your position just because she's upset, you are demonstrating something primal. You are showing her that your sense of self does not depend on her emotional weather. That you have an internal compass that doesn't recalibrate based on her moods. And this exact quality is what she has been testing for since the moment she met you. Every argument she starts that seems irrational. Every emotional escalation that feels disproportionate. Every time she pushes a boundary to see what happens, she is not trying to destroy you. She is trying to find the wall. She wants to know, does this man have a limit? Does he have a shape that holds under pressure? Or will he collapse into whatever form I push him into? The man who collapses passes the comfort test. He fails the respect test. And desire lives in respect, not comfort. Cato the Younger understood this at a molecular level. He was one of the wealthiest senators in Rome. He could have lived in silk. Instead, he walked barefoot through the streets in winter. He wore the roughest toga available. He ate standing up. He drank cheap wine when his cellar held vintages that other senators would kill for. This was not performance. This was not aesthetic minimalism. This was a man training himself to need nothing, so that nothing could be used against him. And here is the part history books barely mention. Women were drawn to him, not despite his austerity, but because of it. His wife Marcia was so devoted that when he agreed to let his friend Hortensius marry her as a political arrangement, she went. She fulfilled the arrangement, and when Hortensius died, she returned to Cato voluntarily with her entire inheritance. She came back richer, more committed, more devoted than before, because Cato was not a man who needed her. He was a man who chose her, and a woman chosen by a man who needs nothing experiences a different kind of devotion. This is the architecture that 99% of men refuse to build. Not because it's complicated, but because it requires risking her displeasure. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. Because theory without application is decoration. She tells you about a friend who wronged her. The story is emotional, detailed. She wants you to agree that the friend is terrible. The average man nods and validates. That's awful, you deserve better. He thinks he scored points. He scored nothing. He became furniture. The man practicing Parisia listens fully. Then he says, that sounds painful, but I've heard you describe 3 friendships ending the same way this year. At some point, the common element is worth examining. Her face changes. Maybe anger, maybe shock. Something tightens in her jaw. She didn't expect resistance. She expected the warm bath of agreement. But here's what happens next. And this is the part that rewrites everything. She goes quiet. Not the quiet of hurt, the quiet of being genuinely seen. Because somewhere beneath the outrage, she knows he's right. She knows she's been repeating patterns, and no one has ever cared enough about her to say it. That silence after honest words is sacred ground. It is where respect is forged. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal, never meant for publication, a line most people skim past. The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane. He was writing about intellectual courage, but the principle maps perfectly onto relationships. The insanity is the modern man's compulsion to merge with a woman's emotional reality at the expense of his own, to abandon what he sees, what he knows, what he believes, just to keep the peace. Aurelius ruled an empire while plague killed 1/3 of his population. His generals betrayed him. His wife's fidelity was questioned. His own body failed him slowly. And through all of it, his journal remained measured, precise, brutally honest. He didn't pretend things were fine. He didn't seek comfort in illusion. He looked directly at what was broken and called it broken. That discipline, that refusal to lie to himself, became the foundation of everything else. His leadership, his legacy, and his ability to maintain composure in relationships that would break lesser men. There is a second dimension to this. It's not just about speaking truth. It's about having standards you enforce without negotiation. Seneca wrote that a man should periodically practice poverty, sleep on hard ground, eat cheap food, wear rough clothing. Then ask himself, is this the condition I feared? Most people think this is about money. It's not. It's about emotional sovereignty. Seneca himself was one of the wealthiest men in Rome. He advised emperors and owned estates across the Mediterranean. Yet several nights each month he slept on bare stone. He ate bread and water. He wore fabric that would humiliate a laborer, not as penance but as inoculation. He was vaccinating himself against the disease that destroys men fastest, the fear of losing comfort. A man who fears losing comfort will lie. He will submit. He will hollow himself and hand the shell to whoever threatens him. Seneca refused to be that man. His refusal gave him something no wealth could buy, genuine freedom in every relationship he entered. He could speak truth to Nero, the most dangerous man alive, because he had already rehearsed having nothing. In relationships, this manifests as something women experience rarely. She escalates, she tests, she pushes boundaries, and you do neither. You don't raise your voice, you don't cave. You simply state your position like a man describing the weather. Factual, unheated, complete. I hear you. I understand. I'm not changing my answer. 12 words. No aggression, no apology, no negotiation. Watch what happens to her breathing. She has encountered something her nervous system has been scanning for since adolescence. She has found the wall, and the wall didn't crumble. It didn't fight back. It just stood there, solid, certain, unmoved. Admiral James Stockdale spent 7 years as a prisoner of war in the Hanoi Hilton, tortured,